Not exactly sure how to phrase this, so I didn't raise my hand, but recently I substitute teach, and I was in a class with the Scarlet Letter, and so I was supposed to have read it in high school, and I finally read it again. And one of the things that bothers me is the connotation that when people bring out Puritan as an adjective, it's always as a negative thing. When in our history did the Puritans that had come over, when did that go from being more of a righteous thing to being bringing that image of the self-righteous, judgmental kind of attitude?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, very good question.
I'll take a stab at that, and I'll let Dr. Trueman correct or modify. But let me just give a generic principle first. Whenever a group of people are really concerned about living a godly life and really try to do that as much as possible, there's always going to be a little remnant among those people that probably will slide into a bit of legalism. Just like Dr. Trueman was saying, our tendency today in America is to slide towards antinomianism. And I would not deny that there were certain Puritans, a very small minority, I believe, that actually did, throw out some rather legalistic things. But it was more out of concern for godly piety, and maybe they went a bit overboard at times. But here's the second general principle. Whenever a group of people really insist on righteous, godly living and really strive for pietas or piety in the Calvinian sense of the word, when the next generation comes along and is not primarily motivated by wanting to live a life of holiness to God, when you read their books, you feel uncomfortable because you feel like they're sitting in judgment on you. My wife and I were praying in front of the abortion clinic last week, and a lady pulled up, slammed on the brakes, jumped out of the car, and came over to us and said, "What do you think you're doing? You're making us feel guilty." And she had had an abortion at that abortion clinic 2 weeks before, and she was angry with us. And we told her we loved her, we cared about the fruit of the womb, and that we believed in the image of God and babies. I said, if you're a Christian, you look at things differently. And I said, sorry if we've offended you in any way, but we love you and we care about you. And so then she backed down. But why did she stop to begin with? I think she was feeling guilty when she saw someone pray, in some degree at least. And I think people in the 18th, 19th centuries, when they were imbibing the winds of the Enlightenment and living more worldly lives, and then they read this Puritan stuff, it just seemed too self-righteous and over the top and guilt-producing. And their reaction was to poo-poo it, call it legalistic. Anyone who's more conservative than you, there's something in all of us that tends to call that person legalistic, and when we don't even know the motives of the heart. So God alone knows the heart. But the unfortunate thing is that people began to pick up on Hawthorne's writings and other people like him, and actually thought that the Puritans were prudes, that they were killjoys, they weren't very sexual in their marriage, when the actual fact of the matter is the Puritans were probably the happiest group of people I know of in church history, bequeath to us the Christian home where the man loves his wife and enjoys having sex with her and doesn't have to go out and look for a mistress. So much of it was so wrong. And the amazing thing, it was the secular historians in the 1920s, Woodhouse and Perry Miller and those guys, that resurrected the truth about the Puritans. And of course, most of us who know the Puritans a little bit today know how much falsity was charged against them in the 19th century. But there are still Americans today who don't know about the correct development, and they're still living 100 years in the past or 150 years in the past, thinking that the 19th century view of these Puritans was the correct one when it's such a caricature.
Yeah, I'd add as well. I think in American culture, I think the Salem witch trials are very significant. It certainly was the case a few years ago. I read somewhere that after the American Civil War, the Salem witch trials had inspired more secondary literature than any other single event. If that's true, that's quite a staggering figure for what was really a relatively small incident. It's remarkable, I think, because it's a witch trial that occurs at the very end of the kind of witch frenzy. But clearly that has come to loom large in the American historical imagination, I think, lies behind that. But as Joel has alluded to, in the 19th century, there are quite a number of literary figures, some more, some less sympathetic to Christianity, who portray what might call vigorous doctrinal Christianity in a negative light. I love the novels of Sir Walter Scott, but, Old Mortality, The Covenants of the Bad People, Heart of Midlothian, the Covenants of the Nutcase. I think it's part of 19th century literature to make the more zealous wing of Christianity a whipping boy for everything that's kind of obscurantist and represents the worst aspects of the past. But in America, I think the Salem witch trial is very significant for fixing in the popular mind what Puritanism stands for.